Morning everyone. So Skulduggery Pleasant, Chapter 2, The Will. Life in the Edgeley household was fairly uneventful. Stephanie's mother worked in a bank and her father owned a construction company, and she had no brothers or sisters, so the routine they had settled into was one of amiable convenience. But even so, there was always the voice in the back of her mind telling her that there should be more to her life than this. More to her life than the small coastal town of Haggard. She just couldn't figure out what that something was. Her first year of secondary school had just come to a close, and she was looking forward to the summer break. Stephanie didn't like school. She found it difficult to get along with her classmates, not because they weren't nice people, but simply because she had nothing in common with them. And she didn't like teachers. She didn't like the way they demanded respect they hadn't earned. Stephanie had no problem doing what she was told, just as long as she was given a good reason why she should. She had spent the first few days of the summer helping out her father, answering phones, sorting through the files in his office. Gladys, his secretary for 7 years, had decided she'd had enough of the construction business and wanted to try her hand as a performance artist. Stephanie found it vaguely discomforting whenever she passed her on the street, this 43-year-old woman doing a modern dance interpretation of Faust. Gladys had made herself a costume to go with the act, a costume, she said, that symbolised the eternal struggle Faust was going through, and apparently she refused to be seen in public without it. Stephanie did her best to avoid catching Gladys's eye. If Stephanie wasn't helping out in the office, she was either down at the beach, swimming, or locked in her room listening to music. She was in her room trying to find the charger for her mobile phone when her mother knocked on the door and stepped in. She was dressed in the sombre clothes she had worn to the funeral, though Stephanie had tied back her long dark hair and changed into her usual jeans and trainers within 2 minutes of returning to the house. "We've had a call from Gordon's solicitor," her mother said, sounding a little surprised. "They want us at the reading of the will." "Oh," Stephanie responded. "What do you think he left you?" "Well, we'll find out tomorrow. You too, because you're coming with us." "I am?" Stephanie said. "Well, your name's on the list, that's all I know. We're leaving at 10, okay?" "I'm supposed to be helping Dad tomorrow?" He called Gladys, asked her to fill in for a few hours as a favour. She said yes, as long as she could wear the peanut suit. They left for the solicitors at 10:15 the next morning. 15 minutes later than planned, thanks to Stephanie's father's casual disregard for punctuality, he ambled through the house, looking like there was something he'd forgotten, and he was just waiting for it to occur to him again. He nodded and smiled whenever his wife told him to hurry up, and said, "Yeah, absolutely," and just before he was due to join them in the car, he meandered off again, looking around with a dazed expression. "Oh, he does this on purpose," Stephanie's mother said as they sat in the car, seatbelts on, ready to go. They watched him appear at the front door, shrug into his jacket, tuck in his shirt, go to step out, and then pause. "He looks like he's about to sneeze," Stephanie remarked. No, said his mother. "Just thinking." She stuck her head out the window. "Desmond, what's wrong now?" He looked puzzled. "Oh, I think I'm forgetting something." Stephanie leaned forward in the back seat, took a look at him and spoke to her mother, who nodded and stuck her head out again. "Where are your shoes, dear?" He looked down at his socks, one brown, one navy, and his clouded expression cleared. He gave them the thumbs up and disappeared from view. "Oh, that man," her mother said, shaking her head. "Did you know he once lost a shopping centre?" "He what?" "I never told you that. It was the first big contract he got. His company did a wonderful job, and he was driving his clients to see it, and he forgot where he put it. He drove around for almost an hour until he saw something he recognised. He may be a very talented engineer, but I swear, attention span of a goldfish. So unlike Gordon." "They weren't very alike, were they?" His mother smiled. "It wasn't always that way. They used to do everything together. The three of them were inseparable." "Even Fergus?" "Even Fergus. But when your grandmother died, they all drifted apart. Gordon started mixing with a strange crowd after that." "Strange? How?" "They probably just appeared strange to us," said her mother. "Your dad was getting started in the construction business, and I was in college, and we were what you might call normal. Gordon resisted being normal, and his friends, they kind of scared us. We never knew what they were into, but we knew it wasn't anything normal. Exactly, yeah. They scared your dad most of all, though. Why? Stephanie's father walked out of the house, shoes on, and closed the front door after him. I think he was more like Gordon than he liked to let on, her mother said quietly, and then her dad got into the car. Okay, I'm ready, look, he said proudly. They looked at him and he nodded. Chuffed with himself, he strapped on his seatbelt, turned the key. The engine purred to life. Stephanie waved to Jasper, an 8-year-old boy with unfortunate ears, as her dad backed out of the road, put the car in gear, and they were off, narrowly missing their wheelie bin as they went. They drove to the solicitor's office in the city, took a little under an hour, and they arrived 20 minutes late. They welled up a flight of creaky stairs to a small office, too warm to be comfortable, with a large window that offered a wonderful view of the brick wall outside the street. Fergus and Beryl were there, and they showed their displeasure at having been kept waiting by looking at their watches and scowling. Stephanie's parents took the remaining seats, and Stephanie stood behind them as the solicitor peered at them through cracked spectacles. Now, can we get started? Beryl snapped. The solicitor, a short man named Mr. Fedgwick, with the girth and appearance of a sweaty bowling ball, tried smiling. We still have one more person to wait on, he said, and Fergus's eyes bulged. Who? He demanded. There can't be anyone else. We are the only siblings Gordon had. Who is it? It's not some charity, is it? I've never trusted charities. They always want something from you. It's not a charity, Mr. Fedgwick said. He did say, however, he might be a little late. Who said? Stephanie's father asked, and the solicitor looked down at the file open before him. A most unusual name, this, he said. It seems we are waiting on one Mr. Skulduggery Pleasant. Well, who on earth is that? Asked Beryl, irritated. He sounds like a Fergus, what does he sound like? He sounds like a weirdo, Fergus said, glaring at Mr. Fedgwick. He's not a weirdo, is he? I really couldn't say, Fedgwick answered, his paltry excuse for a smile fading miserably under the glares he was getting from Fergus and Beryl. But I'm sure he'll be along soon. Fergus frowned, narrowing his beady eyes as much as was possible. How are you sure? Fedgwick faltered, unable to offer a reason, and then the door opened, and the man in the tan overcoat entered the room. Sorry I'm late, he said, closing the door behind him. It was unavoidable, I'm afraid. Everyone in the room stared at him, stared at the scarf, the gloves, the sunglasses, and the wild, fussy hair. It was a glorious day outside, certainly not the kind of weather to be wrapped up like this. Stephanie looked closer at the hair. From this distance, it didn't look real. The solicitor cleared his throat. Are you Skulduggery Pleasant? At your service, the man said. Stephanie could listen to that voice all day. Her mother, uncertain as she was, had smiled her greetings, but her father was looking at him with an expression of wariness she had never seen on his face before. After a moment, the expression left him, and he nodded politely and looked back to Mr. Fedgwick, Fergus and Beryl, who were still staring. Do you have something wrong with your face? Beryl asked. Fedgwick cleared his throat again. OK, then, let's get down to business now that we're all here. Excellent, good. This, of course, being the last will and testament of Gordon Edgley, revised from last time almost a year ago. Gordon has been a client of mine for the past 20 years, and in that time I got to know him well, so let me pass on to you, his family and friend, my deepest. Yes, Fergus interrupted, waving his hand in the air. Can we just skip this part? We're already running behind schedule. Let's get to the part where we get the stuff. Who gets the house? Who gets the villa? Who gets a fortune? Beryl asked, leaning forward in her seat. The royalties, Fergus said. Who gets the royalties? All of them, from the books. Stephanie glanced at Skulduggery Pleasant from the corner of her eye. He was standing back against the wall, hands in his pockets, looking at the solicitor. Well, he seemed to be looking at the solicitor. With those sunglasses, he could have been looking anywhere. She returned her gaze to Fedgwick as he picked up a page from the desk and read from it. To my brother Fergus and his beautiful wife Beryl, he read, and Stephanie did her best to hide a grin. I leave my car and my boat and a gift. Fergus and Beryl blinked. His car? Fergus said. His boat? Why would he leave his boat? You hate the water, Beryl said, anger rising in her voice. You get seasick. I do get seasick, Fergus snapped, and he knew that. Excuse me. And we already have a car, Beryl said. And we already have a car, Fergus repeated. Beryl was sitting so far up on her chair that she was almost on the desk. This gift, she said, her voice low. Is it the fortune? Mr. Fedgwick coughed nervously. and took a small box from his desk and slid it towards them. They looked at this box. They looked some more. And they both reached for it at the same time, and Stephanie watched them slap at each other's hands until Barry snatched it off the desk and tore the lid open. "What is it?" Fergus asked in a small voice. "Is it a key to a safety deposit box? Is it an account number? What is it, wife? What is it?" All the colour drained from Beryl's face and her hands were shaking. She blinked hard to keep the tears away. Then she turned the box for everyone to see, and everyone saw the brooch, about the size of a drinks coaster, nestled in the plush cushion. Fergus stared at it. "It doesn't even have any jewels on it," Beryl said, her voice strangled. Fergus opened his mouth wide, like a startled fish, and turned to Fedric. "What else do we get?" he said, panicking. Mr. Fedric tried another smile. Your brother's love?" Stephanie heard a high-pitched whine, and it took her a moment to realise it was coming from Beryl. Fedric returned his attention to the will, trying to ignore the horrified looks he was getting from Fergus and his wife. "To my good friend and guide, Skulduggery Pleasant, I leave you the following advice. Your path is your own, and I have no wish to sway you. But sometimes the greatest enemy we can face is ourselves, and the greatest battle is against the darkness within. There is a storm coming, and sometimes the key to safe harbour is hidden from us, and sometimes it is right before our eyes." Stephanie joined in with everyone else as they stared at Mr. Pleasant. She had known there was something different about him. She had known it the first moment she saw him. There was something exotic, something mysterious, something dangerous. For his part, his head dipped lower, and that was the only reaction he gave. He offered no explanations as to what Gordon's message had meant. Fergus patted his wife's knee. "See, Beryl? A car, a boat, a brooch. It's not that bad. He could have just given us some stupid advice." "Oh, shut up, would you?" Beryl snarled, and Fergus recoiled in his chair. Mr. Fedric read on. "To my other brother, Desmond, the lucky one of the family, I leave to you your wife. I think you might like her." Stephanie saw her parents clasp each other's hands and smile sadly. "So now that you've successfully stolen my girlfriend, maybe you'd like to take her to my villa in France, which I am also leaving you." "Take her to the villa?" Beryl cried, jumping to her feet. "Beryl!" Fergus said. "Please!" "Do you know how much that villa is worth?" Beryl continued, looking like she might lunge at Stephanie's parents. "We get a brooch, they get a villa. There are only 3 of them. We've got Carol and Crystal. We have more. Who could do with the extra space? Why do they deserve a villa?" She thrust the box towards them. "Stop! Mrs. Edgley, please retake your seat or we shall be unable to continue," Mr. Fedric said, and eventually, after much bug-eyed glaring, Beryl sat down. "Thank you," Fedric said, looking like he had just quite enough excitement for one day. He licked his lips, adjusted his glasses, and peered again at the will. "If there's one regret that I have had in my life, it is that I have never fathered any children. There are times when I look at what Fergus and Beryl have produced, and I consider myself fortunate. But there are also times when it breaks my heart. And so finally, to my niece, Stephanie." Stephanie's eyes widened. What? She was getting something? Leaving the villa to her parents wasn't enough for Gordon? Fedric continued reading. "The world is bigger than you know and scarier than you might imagine. The only currency worth anything is being true to yourself, and the only goal worth seeking is finding out who you truly are." She could feel Fergus and Beryl glaring at her, and she did her best to ignore them. "Make your parents proud. It's just because I know what's coming, I'm really sorry. And make them glad to have you living under their roof. Because... I'm so sorry. I leave to you my property and possessions, my assets and my royalties, to be inherited on the day you turn 18. I'd just like to take this opportunity to say that, in my own way, I love you all, even those I don't particularly like. That's you, Beryl." Fedric took off his spectacles and looked up. Stephanie became aware that everyone was staring at her, and she hadn't a clue what she was supposed to do. Fergus was again doing his startled expression, and Beryl was pointing one long bony finger at her, trying to speak but failing. Her parents were looking at her in stunned surprise. Only Skulduggery Pleasant moved, walking behind her and gently touching her arm. "Congratulations," he said, and moved on towards the door. As soon as it clicked shut behind her, Beryl found her voice. "Ah!" she screamed. "Ah!" And I'm going to leave it there. That's the end of that chapter. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.